When was the last time that you felt like the whole world was just coming crashing down all around you? And during these times, we have no idea why. Today, we're going to study Joshua chapter 7, and we're going to find that Joshua finds himself in a situation very much like this. So, we all experience times in our life when things just don't make any sense at all, when we just can't understand why things are happening the way they are all around us. And this is a theme that kind of goes through Joshua chapter 7. And this is where Joshua finds himself. He ends up hitting sort of rock bottom. And he finds himself despondent and in despair. So remember that Joshua is the successor to Moses. And Joshua has been, whether he's ready for it or not, Joshua has been given a leadership position over the entire nation of Israel. And scholars think that there was over 2 million people. And Joshua was thrust into this position, and he has to accomplish now what Moses could not accomplish. He has to bring the entire nation of Israel into the promised land. And this means that there's going to be a lot of war, a lot of battle. And Joshua has to be a leader. He has to be strong and courageous. And God, when God talks to him, God told him like several times, you have to be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. I'll be with you. The leadership comes with its ups and downs. And right now, Joshua is riding this super high, right? Because what happened? God just demolished Jericho and gave Jericho into the Israelites' hands. And it was miraculous the way that God defeated Jericho, because he showed the whole world that God is truly in charge. Because what did he do? He didn't have them, use cannons or trebuchets or anything like that. They marched around the city with the presence of God, with the Ark of the Covenant, once a day for 6 days, and 7 times on the 7th day. Then they blew the shofar as loud as they could. Then all the people yelled when Joshua said to yell, and the walls came tumbling down. And they took the city, except for Rahab. Rahab and her entire family were redeemed. They were saved. So the entire nation of Israel is riding this high. And emotionally, spiritually, physically, I think they're at this all-time high. They can't believe that God's promise to the Israelites is finally coming true, right? And now they want to move on. So let's see what happens. Oh, one thing though, God told them, do not touch anything. Don't touch any of the precious jewelry or anything. Don't take any plunder from Jericho. And we're going to find out why later on. But that's where our story picks up. Joshua chapter 7. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth-aven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and spied out Ai. So a couple things are going on right here. Okay, so Achan stole some of the precious things that he was not supposed to touch, right? This was a very strict commandment. Joshua doesn't know it, though. In fact, nobody knows it except for Achan and his family, because they've hidden these things inside their tent. So in verse 2, Joshua is doing exactly what worked last time, right? He's doing exactly what his mentor Moses taught him to do. He's sending out spies. So he sends men to Ai, and this is their next battle. is the Battle of Ai. They're going to do some reconnaissance and spy it out, right? He says, go up and spy out the region. So the men went and spied it out. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of the Israelites. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. So what's going on here? So Joshua sends out the spies, and the spies come back, and this has been a successful strategy. The spies come back and they report, you know what? Ai is a tiny little city. We just defeated mighty Jericho, this huge citadel, right, in the Canaan region. And now this tiny little Ai, there's hardly any people there, not many warriors, just sent about 2,000 or 3,000 people, 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers. And Joshua jumps straight into battle. He sends us 2,000 or 3,000 people. Notice, though, that Joshua does not talk to God as he did before Jericho. He spent a lot of time consecrating himself, consecrating the people, and just camping out and just waiting and talking to God directly and getting instructions from God directly before moving against Jericho. Here against Ai, he never checks in with God. He listens to his spies and just sends the men. If he would have taken the time to talk to God, God might have told him, hey, my anger is burning against Israel. Let's just hold off on the next battle and let's clear things up. Let's make things right first. But Joshua doesn't do that. He makes his first huge mistake as a leader. And because he doesn't do that, he sends 2,000 or 3,000 men and they are routed, right? They're literally being killed as they're running away from the warriors of Ai. This tiny little city is easily defeating and routing the nation of Israel, the warriors of Israel who just defeated Jericho. And when the Israelites hear this, their hearts melt, right, with fear, and they become like water. Let's take a look at this word routed. Okay, dictionary.com says that rout means defeat and cause to retreat in disorder. Defeat and cause to retreat in disorder. So Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before God, before the ark of the Lord, which is the presence of God. He remained there until evening. So this was a custom that the Jewish people had, right? And when they are just so deeply in anguish and despair and fear, it's their custom to tear their clothing, to just rip their clothes. It's like they just are so just, their clothes can't contain them. It's just like they're so frustrated, right? And Joshua falls face down, right? His face is in the dirt, right? And he stays there until evening. The elders of Israel did the same thing, and they sprinkled dust on their heads, right? So they're saying that they're mourning, right? They're mourning the death of these soldiers, and they're not understanding what God is doing, right? And so Joshua is plunging into this pit of despair because these people that died, he's directly responsible for them. He is the leader of all of Israel. And it doesn't make any sense to Joshua. Like, why did these people die? I did everything right. Why did God allow us to be routed? Like, why did we defeat Jericho so easily and now tiny little Ai has routed us completely? What is going on? This makes no sense. And I sense that Joshua's probably a little frustrated with God. Like, he doesn't understand what God is doing and why God is allowing this to happen. And so he goes straight to God. And that's something we need to learn. Because a lot of times when we're full of fear, full of despair, full of even anger or frustration with God, we tend to avoid God. That's our thing, right? In Western culture these days, we tend to isolate ourselves, right? When we're angry, when we're mad, we tend to just shut down. But Joshua doesn't do that. He goes straight to the Ark of the Covenant. He goes straight to the presence of God and lays there prostrate, right? And lays there and humbles himself before God, literally putting his face in the dirt and staying there. And Joshua finally said, "Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan." Whoa, this is ultimate despair. Who is Joshua sounding like? Remember when Joshua was very young, right? He was sent as a spy by Moses, and he and Caleb came back and said, "The promised land is awesome. Let's go. God has given it to us. Let's go." But what did the 10 other spies say? What did the rest of the nation of Israel say? They say, "Oh, this is terrible. There's giants over there. They're going to kill us all. We should go back to Egypt and ask to be slaves again." This is exactly what Joshua is saying, right? This is hardwired. It's like he's got this fear that's deep-seated in the back of his mind, right? And this event, this anger, this frustration, this fear, it just taps right into it. It's like it pushes that button. And what does he say? He says, "If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan." And that's us too, isn't it? A lot of times when we take up God's work, it's not easy. In fact, our life gets more complicated. I want to talk to people that are Christians here who have made the commitment to follow Christ and become more like Christ. You know, being a Christian, I think a lot of you have experienced the same thing that I have, that every time we step out in faith, life actually gets harder. It doesn't get easier. We actually encounter more attacks from the enemy. It's not like it's just smooth sailing once we commit to God. And those of you that have not completely committed your life to Christ, you have to know this. Okay, if you've heard this thing called the prosperity gospel, where some pastors are saying, "Oh yeah, if you're a Christian, you're going to get money, you're going to get rich, you're going to be wealthy and comfortable and never suffer," that is complete bunk. That is not true at all. Okay, if you commit your life to following Christ, it's a hard road. It's harder in some ways, in a lot of ways, than not being a Christian, because you're going to have an enemy who is going to attack you spiritually, not just, physically. And you have to know that being a Christian and taking up your cross and following Christ means that there are going to be battles. It's not just a life of comfort. Okay? Let's get back to the text. "Pardon your servant, Lord." Okay, so I think that Joshua senses, like, he says what he means, but then, like, as he hears himself say it, he's like, "Ooh, I crossed a line there." So he's asking forgiveness from God here. He says, "Excuse me," or "Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth." So Joshua really is fearful that, this is his deepest fear that he shares with God. He says, "You know what? I'm afraid that we're going to be completely wiped out, and our name will be wiped from the earth. Not just our existence, our physical presence, but no one's even going to know about, like, we're going to be gone, right? They're going to wipe us out." And then look at what he says. He says, "What then will you do for your own great name?" So a lot of people kind of skip over this last sentence, this last question, but it's actually really important and really poignant. Because here, Joshua is again, he says, what will you do for your own great name? He's kind of reestablishing the authority of God here. He's kind of saying, you know what, God, you're the one that's in control. You're the one that is fighting these battles. You're the one that beat Jericho. Okay? What will you do for your great name? Okay? So he puts it back on God and he sees more of the right perspective, right? So let's see if God responds. This is God speaking directly to Joshua. Go, consecrate the people. And again, let's remind ourselves, what does that mean? That word consecrate mean? To consecrate means to purify, to repent, to set aside for God's purposes, to rededicate, to commit oneself, right? So he says, go and get the people recommitted, okay, to God. Okay, specifically to recommit to God. It's not just to commit to anything. Okay, go consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. Okay, so God is telling him point blank, look, you guys have stolen things that are holy, that are sacred, things that belong to me, things that I never intended for you to have. You have taken them into your possession. And as long as you hang on to these things, hiding them and keeping them, you're never going to beat your enemies. You're never going to be able to stand against your enemies until you eradicate them completely, until you get rid of these things. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall come forward family by family, and the family the Lord chooses shall come forward man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord of Israel, and honor him. So I skipped a couple verses. So basically what happens is they get up the next morning and Joshua does exactly what God says. And God chooses the tribe, God chooses the clan, God chooses the family, and God chooses Achan. And he tells Joshua, hey, bring Achan up here. And Joshua says it to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. So in front of 2 million Israelites, God calls out the one person, right? God talks right to Joshua and says, hey, bring Achan up here. Achan replied, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them, and I took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So let's think about this. Let's talk about Achan and his sin. Okay. So he should have, this sounds a lot like, hey, he's confessing, he's repenting, but he waited until it was way too late. If he was truly repenting, if he was truly, confessing, he should have done this on his own before God called him out in front of all the Israelites, right? He was still probably kind of hoping, gosh, I hope I get away with this, but no, God called him out right away. Let's look at this sin that he does, okay? So a beautiful Babylonian garment, okay? So I researched this, and it looks like it's a costly, ornate robe of Shinar, beautified by colored figures of men or animals. woven or done in needlework, and perhaps trimmed with jewels. The word is used for a king's robe in Jonah 3:6. Okay, so this is a beautiful, beautiful garment. And let's think about where these Israelites are coming from. They've just spent 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness. I don't think their clothes are looking too sharp, right? And they probably haven't seen anything like this, maybe not even in their entire lifetime, right? And then he sees silver and he sees gold. He has not seen these kind of things, okay, probably in his entire lifetime. So here's the application to us. In this day and age, in any day and age, but especially in this day and age, because everything is digital, because we're constantly being bombarded and barraged by social media, our cell phones, our laptops, the television, all these forms of media, we're constantly having images flashed in front of our face, right? And to a certain extent, we really can't control every single thing that we see, right? So a simple example is you're trying to, you're researching something on the internet for school, and then images, advertisements of something else come up. Okay, so sometimes you can't control what you see. Or let's say some of you drive already. So let's say you're driving, your car, and then you look and there's a billboard, some kind of advertising. You can't always control what you see. Okay, and that's just a fact of life, especially for us in this day and age. Okay, but here's the thing: you can control what you dwell on. Okay, so Achan's cycle of sin is that first he sees something, which we all see stuff that we're not supposed to, take or have, or things that are not good for us, right? But then he coveted. Okay, how did it go from his eyeballs into his heart? Okay, how did the Babylonian garment, how did the robe go from his eyeballs into his heart? Well, because, quite simply, he dwelled on it. Okay, he dwelled on it. He kept looking at it. He kept thinking about it, right? So when we have things on our phone or on social media or laptops, media, whatever, okay, things we see that we know we're not supposed to see it, right? And there's some things that are so just obvious we're not supposed to be looking at this. Then there's other things that are like, I don't think I'm supposed to be looking at it. Well, if you don't think you're supposed to be looking at it, you're probably not, okay? It's probably a good indication that you shouldn't, okay? But if you keep looking at it, that's when you covet, okay? That's when it goes into your heart. It's no longer just in your eyes, okay? It goes into your heart, okay? And that is very much like the story of David and Bathsheba, right? So David, king of Israel later on, he's out, chilling. He's hanging out on his patio, and he's way up high, and he looks down at one of the houses, down below his, and he sees this beautiful, beautiful woman who is bathing, right? She's bathing. And at that moment, instead of turning around and leaving, okay, he keeps watching her. Okay, so she goes from his eyes into his heart, right? Because he dwells on it. And then he acts. In Achan's case, he acts. He took. Okay, and follow the verse. The verse says, "I saw, I coveted, I took." The taking he was done. He was toast already. Once he coveted and it went from his eyeballs into his heart, this action is just, it's just a result of the previous step, which is the cause, right? It's just a natural result, right? It's almost like he could not control himself. He took it, right? And then what did he do with it? He brought it to his family and they hid it under the tent, instead of confessing and repenting. Okay, now his entire family knew, everybody in Israel knew that this was a very strict command from God not to take anything. So when the family helped him or didn't say anything, about this, Of course, they're not going to say, hey, this is our father, this is my husband, we're not going to, but by not taking any action, okay, they are basically putting themselves as co-conspirators, right? So Joshua sent the messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent, with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, why have you brought trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today. And by the way, that valley of Achor literally means trouble. Okay? These are not words that any human being wants to hear from God. The Lord will bring trouble on you today. That is not a good thing to hear. Okay? Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains there to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since, or the Valley of Trouble. Now, this punishment, I'm sure to all of you, just like it did to me, sounds extremely harsh, right? Like, really? Did they really have to kill Achan and his, like, all his belongings? And what about his kids, like his family? Really? Were they really guilty of this as well? Here's the thing about Achan's sin, okay? First of all, his sin was a sin against Israel, okay? It's considered a sin against Israel because you have to remember that their culture is very different than Western culture, very different than American culture today. Today, American culture espouses, we're all about rugged individualism. We view ourselves as individuals, not them, right? And we can understand this as Korean Americans because Korean culture is very different this way as well, right? Koreans, we view ourselves as part of a whole, right? Each individual is a part of a family or part of a community. So that brings a lot more pressure on us, especially for children. Like as you're studying, you know that what you do, right? Whether you study or don't study, or let's say whether you sin or don't sin, let's say that, you commit some atrocious sin, that brings sort of shame on the whole family, right? That's the way, at least that's the way Korean culture views it, right? Well, same thing with Israeli, Middle Eastern culture back then, and now too, but back then, they view individuals not as, the rugged individual, they view individuals as part of a community and part of a society, right? And so when Achan sins, when God commands Israel, don't take anything, okay, this is a command to all of Israel. And so if you break that command, you're sinning against your own people, against the people of Israel. And if you look at this, the direct result of that, of Achan's sin against Israel, is that the Israeli army is routed by little Ai, and 36 Israelites die, right? Directly because of Achan. Also, Joshua messed up too. Joshua should have consulted God. Joshua should have talked to God. But 36 Israelites dying is because God was so angry at the Israelites for sinning. And, God was probably waiting for Joshua to talk to him and ask him what's going on. But the 36 Israelites dying, that's on Achan. Okay. Achan's sin was also obviously a sin against God. He directly disobeyed what God told him to do. Okay. Plundering Jericho was strictly forbidden. Now, there's going to be 31 other nation slash city slash kingdoms that the Israelites end up defeating. 31. Okay. But Jericho was first fruits to God. First fruits means the first thing, like when you receive blessings, whether it's financial blessings or whatever it is, right? We are to offer our first fruits. They belong to God, right? They are holy. They are His. We're just giving back what He has given us, right? And so first fruits is a very, very important concept that we still today, to this day, if you think about tithing, okay, we are to tithe. We're supposed to give a tenth of our income. We're supposed to give the best tenth, the first tenth, right? Not like wait until the end and then, give whatever's left over to God. No. And Jericho, the entire city, that first battle, that was first fruits. Nobody was supposed to plunder that. And because Achan plundered it, God's anger was provoked. Finally, Achan sinned against his family, right? When Achan brought the plunder home and he hid it in his tent, I don't know. It doesn't say how much did the children know? How much did the wife, did they help him? Who knows? We don't know. But again, you have to go back to the culture of the Middle East, the culture of Israel, right? They don't view, if somebody sins, right, that person is not just an individual, especially in the case where they sin and they bring stuff home and everyone hides, they hide it in the family home, right? The entire family is viewed as the one unit, right? Not the individual. So it was perfectly natural, it was perfectly normal for them to punish the entire family, right? And so Achan's sin brought trouble on his entire family. And Achan's sin was a sin, kind of against his family as well. And because of it, Achan's entire family paid the price, right? And this is one of those things that not a lot of people talk about, not a lot of pastors talk about, but, the sin of the fathers, it passes down to generation. The consequences of the sin can pass down to generations. A simple example of that is, if let's say that I'm a complete alcoholic, let's say I train my body to just have a demand and a need to always have alcohol, or I can't even function, right? So I'm a complete alcoholic. And then later I have kids after being an alcoholic for years and years and years and years, to the point where it changes my anatomy. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know all of the all the details, but there's consequences that pass down to the next generation. Or maybe an easier example is, let's say that I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and I'm pregnant, and I'm using drugs while I'm pregnant, right? We know that there's consequences that pass down to the child, right, for your sin. So I want to go back to something. I want to go back because one of the major themes of this is the pit of despair that Joshua finds himself in. And God pulls him out of it pretty quickly, right? But he's there for a long time. And I would say that this is the lowest point in Joshua's entire life. I don't think living in the desert was as bad as having this great victory and then all of a sudden you're in charge and people die because of your leadership. I think that was the lowest point possibly in Joshua's entire life, right? I mean, the dude was laying face down in the dirt all day. Like, he couldn't even get up. He couldn't eat. He couldn't move. He couldn't, he was completely despondent. And I know that each one of us may have experienced, we experience highs and lows in our life. It's part of humanity. It's part of life, right? Some of us may be in that sort of pit of despair right now. And if you are, there's something that you have to know. And the first thing you have to know is that you're not alone in that pit of despair. You're not by yourself, right? There's a story later on that we'll study about a guy named Daniel, and he's literally in a pit of despair, about to be eaten by lions, and he's not alone. God is right there with him. There's another story about three buddies that get thrown into a pit of despair, into a fiery furnace, and they're not alone. There's a fourth guy walking around with them, and it's God's presence. And if you're finding yourself in a pit of despair in this very difficult time, this self-quarantine, the shelter in place that we have going on, and there's a lot of very depressing news going on right now, it's very easy to get extremely depressed. But you have to know that you're not alone. God is with you. And God says and promises that He is close to the brokenhearted. So if this is where you find yourself, I want you to know that you're not alone. That's the most important thing. God is with you. Even if you can't feel His presence, like Joshua, I'm sure, could not feel God's presence. But remember what Joshua does. He goes to God. He doesn't run away from God. He goes to God. Every instinct in every bone in your body is going to want to run away from God and just be alone. But you have to know that you have to run towards God. So finally, I want to just leave you with this song.
To the one whose dreams have fallen all apart, and all you're left with is a tired and broken heart. I can tell by your eyes you think you're on your own, but you're not alone. Have you heard of the one who can calm the raging sea? Give sight to the blind, pull the lame up to their feet. With a love so strong, it never lets you go. No, you're not alone. You will be safe in His arms. You will be safe in His arms. It's the hands that hold the world are holding your heart. This is the promise He made. He will be with you always. When everything is falling apart, you will be safe in His arms. Did you know that the voice that brings the dead to life is the very same voice that calls you now to rise? So hear Him now, He's calling you home. You will never be alone. You will be safe in His arms. You will be safe in His arms. His hands that hold the world are holding your heart. This is a promise He made. He will be with you always. When everything is falling apart, you will be safe in His arms. These are the hands that built the mountain, the hands that calm the sea. These are the arms that hold the heavens. They are holding you and me. These are the hands that heal the leper, hold the lame up to their feet. These are the arms that were nailed to a cross to break our chains and set us free. You will be safe in His arms. You will be safe in His arms. The hands that hold the world are holding your heart. This is the promise He made. He will be with you always. When everything is falling apart, you will be safe in His arms.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for your promises. Thank you that you are with us Even if we can't hear you or feel you, we can know that you are with us and that you have the best for us, God. I pray, Lord, for every young man and every young woman that they would feel your presence. And I pray that you would especially be close to the brokenhearted. Let them know that you are there. Let them feel you. Thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen.